I don't know the answer. I try to give it to you the next week, and if you're not here, I apologize. You won't hear the answer. But anyway, here it is. Last week in the video, talking about Abraham, Janice came up with a question or a statement that she had not heard a certain phrase, and I'll just read you the quote from the video. I went in and transcribed it. This is we can continue on. So in two dreams, God revealed to Joseph that he would one day rule over his family, but God's plan seemed doomed to fail when Joseph's brothers sold him into Egyptian slavery. But with the Lord's favor, Joseph rose to a position of power in Potiphar's house. Man's evil failures would not foil God's plan. The story of Joseph is a powerful illustration of God's control over human history, and God's divine plan would succeed. God called Abraham's family to be the conduit through whom he would bless all nations. While the ultimate fulfillment would come in Christ, God used Joseph to reveal himself as the gracious God of all. The lesson breakdown is 4 different passages there, or titles: family story of Joseph and his brothers, we discover that God's good plans are always brought to pass, and God remains faithful to his covenant promises, saving his chosen people from famine and using Joseph to save Egypt. David, let's bypass the video today, okay? There is a video. You're putting a link to the video too, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. And I meant to say this earlier. Jennifer and David are putting the handout and the videos on a link on the website, on the church website. So go to destinclc.org, and it's under the story.
Yeah. There is a main link up at the top in the navigation called the story, and that links to every week.
And she's got them as each lesson for each one. So you can go there as a review, or if you miss a week, you can go there. And I'm going to try to get the handout to you before Sunday morning. I did send it late last night. I don't know if you saw it last night.
I did. I saw it this morning.
That way you can go ahead and put the handout on there. So if you're watching online, you'll have a handout. We were out of town, got in late last night, and so I'm trying to get it to her. So, but you'll see the video this week. It's about 11 minutes long, but we're going to bypass that in class so we can get straight to the notes. There is some main points of the video I have given you. Joseph was his dad's favorite, which Todd talked about. In the darkest times of Joseph's life, we read that the Lord was with Joseph. God showed Joseph kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered Joseph to his brothers. And we'll talk about this more. Todd talked about it, and we'll talk about it more. It was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. And finally, let God mold you during the difficult seasons to equip you for the assignment ahead. So if you go through and look at the video later, you'll see those main points. So let's get to the questions so we can get the discussion going. Why did Joseph's brothers want to get rid of him? That's on pages 29 in the book, but it comes from Genesis 37:8. Jealousy. State one word, jealousy, one word. Why was he his favorite? Who was his mother?
Rachel was his favorite wife.
Yes.
God given birth to them.
Yeah. And that's why later in the story, Benjamin was kind of being held back. Jacob was holding Benjamin back. We'll get that again. Reuben was the oldest. Yeah. Oldest.
He seemed to favor him.
Yeah. Right. Reuben. Yeah. Reuben. No, he didn't have the same mother.
Reuben had more common sense.
Reuben is the one who said, "No, let's don't kill him. Let's throw him in the pit." And then Reuben went off.
And Judah said, let's sell him.
Because Reuben was coming back.
So Reuben went off somewhere. They sold Joseph while he was gone. When he comes back, Joseph's gone, and that's where he picked up. Well, remember, this is not 100% of the Bible, but it is 100% Bible. That's one of the top of your handouts that you don't have. There's scripture. I'm giving you scripture. Yes, sir. What?
He was the child.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he did have him at an old age. Yeah. This is Jimmy Johnson's parents. If y'all have it down here. Jimmy and Anna are in Israel, I believe. Right?
That's what they said, right?
That's what they told us, too. So what advice would you have given Joseph about how to handle his coat and his dream? Deborah alluded to the fact that he was sort of arrogant about it. What advice would you have given Joseph?
Keep it
He
quiet.
recognized that he's the youngest. I mean, Benjamin's a baby, so Benjamin doesn't count. But Joseph is the youngest of his brothers, and I'm sure that they totally ignored him and sort of pushed his way in, was to say, I had a dream, and to wear his coat. Otherwise, they didn't have any, I mean, sometimes bad press is better than no press at all.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes at least they noticed it, and we notice that in children. Sometimes they act up and their behavior is poor because they want to.
They want attention.
He was spoiled rotten.
He probably may have been.
Now, I take a little bit
I
of
don't know about
exception to that.
rotten,
Being the youngest, no. It might have been pride, but it also may have been naivety.
Yes.
I think there was probably a lot more naivety on his part than,
There was a lot going on.
yeah.
But,
You do know he didn't know how to follow a trail of a lot of stock.
oh yeah. But I put down he was arrogant. That was kind of my answer too, that he was arrogant. On page 35, when Joseph was sold, did he say, okay, I'll go with the plan, whatever y'all want to do, it's okay with me. What was Joseph's reaction on page 35 when the brothers sold him? Also comes from Genesis 42:21. Todd referenced it this morning.
Luke said it.
Luke, you say it? Yeah, he was distressed and pleaded for his life. What they say, what they said. So we have a phrase that we say today. Why does bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? So why did God allow bad things happen to Joseph? I've given you a list of some possible positive effects of Joseph being sold into slavery. And as we go through the story, and Todd, of course, went through some of this morning, you'll understand it. And I've tried to give you scripture reference because every little detail is not mentioned in the book. To enable him to overcome a prideful attitude and learn humility. This is part of the problem with the brothers. To teach him how to serve. That's speaking.
Yeah, he's doing his own thing. It's not working.
To train him to be faithful. To test him in moral purity. To prepare him to comfort others. To prepare him to lead his brothers to repentance. To teach him patience. To enable him to see God accomplish his purposes, fulfill his promises, to teach him, Joseph, how jealousy can cause suffering, to save many lives, to let him experience the blessing of God's favor, place him in a position to tell Pharaoh of God's power, and there are probably more, but that's what I found. Can anybody think of something else that's not on that list? Don?
Well, I think Joseph's life was kind of foreshadowing of Jesus' life. Joseph went through the same kind of thing.
Come get Wayne. Come get a handout for you and Wayne.
Okay.
Because we're going to be actually talking about that exact thing before we get through.
All right. I won't read it anyway.
Well, we do read that the naming of Joseph's children is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household.
Yeah.
So he did understand that he went through a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So how does Genesis 39:6 describe Joseph? Also on page 31 of the book, Todd alluded to it.
He good looking.
Yeah, NIV says well-built and handsome. English Standard says handsome in form and appearance. Does the phrase drop dead gorgeous go along with men? Is that just women?
That's just women.
Is that just women? What do women call good-looking men then?
Stud. Easy on the eyes.
All right, easy on the eyes. That's a good one. Anyway, so who is Potiphar? What is his position? Todd gave you some information about that.
Captain of the guard.
Get execution.
Okay, first of all, he's an Egyptian official serving Pharaoh. So his boss is Pharaoh. He's the captain of the guard. He was responsible for the personal protection of the Egyptian king. So he was head of security. And his family and court, he also protecting them. And he was presided over the royal prison. So he was like, I didn't know about the executioner part, but I had down prison warden. He's like a prison warden. He had warden of a prison. So that was Potiphar's position. In other words, he was pretty high ranking in Pharaoh's court. So what did Potiphar's wife falsely accuse of Joseph doing? Yeah, some versions say rape. Some just says in 39, 17, and 18, New Living says he tried to come in and fool around with me. That's how New Living puts it. NIV says make sport of us. So, but in 39:14, New Living says it came into the room to rape her. Have you ever been falsely accused? Not of this, but in general, have you ever been falsely accused? Connie saying yes. Would you like to?
Am I the only one?
No.
You want to tell us about it, or let me go to the second question. How did you handle it? You don't have to necessarily say what it was.
I was angry and I was mad at first. It had to do with, I called a doctor and said, your wife's contact lenses are in, and I did not know that was against HIPAA.
Oh.
Because lots of the doctors' wives just said, tell my husband to bring him home.
Yeah, yeah.
They didn't want to come into the office.
Yeah.
And I didn't, so I got called to the office, and it was a fraction I could have been fired over. And for the life of me, I didn't think that was against HIPAA.
Yeah.
But in this case, the doctor did not know his wife was wearing contacts, and when it came out as to why she was wearing contacts, I was in big trouble.
Oh.
But my boss went to bat for me, and I stayed another 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
So I made it through, but I was, yeah.
Okay.
What were you falsely accused of?
Of violence.
Violation of HIPAA.
Violation of something. I should not have let that doctor know about his wife.
Why was that false?
Privacy Act, privacy.
No, what Wayne's saying, why did you feel falsely
why did you feel that was
accused
falsely accused?
when you did tell the doctor his wife's
did that,
contact
so why
were?
would you feel like you were falsely accused?
Because I didn't think it was against,
Oh, so you,
I thought I was okay.
She thought she was okay with it. Anybody else? John?
My little brother, who some of y'all met, his name is Mac, he was once falsely accused of something he did not do. When I was a little bitty, I was running around the house, which I shouldn't have been running in the house. I accidentally knocked over our Christmas tree, broke a lot of balls and all that kind of stuff. Well, I set him up, and not only did he get accused of it, but he got spanked. So he's been falsely accused.
Yeah. So we probably all have had some degree of that. Jared?
Well, as a lesson, I think, the Bible mentions false accusations.
Yeah.
Once you understand what's behind it, the other side is sometimes afraid of the truth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, John set up his little brother because John didn't want to get in trouble.
I was taken to jail.
He's taken to jail.
Yes. Falsely accused.
Really?
More than, that has happened to me more than once.
Yeah.
I was once falsely accused of laughing at one of Wayne's jokes.
When you really didn't
I
like it?
didn't laugh.
You probably just smiled.
So I've put some steps here in the story, not necessarily questions, but just kind of bullet points. And we'll go through them and then stop if you want to comment on one or, some of them, whatever. So this is talking about Joseph, of course. When his master heard the story, his wife told him Joseph was thrown into prison. And I'll try to give you pages from the book and the actual scripture.
Can we stop just a minute on that? The movie about that, The Prince of Egypt, does an excellent job. It's a facial expression. I think Potiphar knew that his wife was falsely accusing Joseph.
Yeah.
And that's why he did not kill him. He only put him into prison because I think Todd was right. He had the power.
Oh, yeah.
You can just see him rolling his eyes a little.
Well, it's just Joseph had always been godly and pure, and Potiphar knew it.
Yeah.
And he also, I'm sure he heard from the other servants that his wife was not so.
Yeah. Yeah, this may not have been the first time she's pulled this trick.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyway, Joseph's thrown in prison. God gifted him the ability to discern the meaning of dreams. Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's baker and wine taster. And then 2 full years passed. Pharaoh had his dreams. No one could interpret them. So then the chief wine taster remembered Joseph. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, giving credit to God for this gift of interpretation. Joseph told Pharaoh that the dreams foretold 7 years of bumper crops to be followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph recommended that a wise man be put in charge of storing food and prepared for the coming famine. That's in Genesis 41:33. So question number 7. Did Pharaoh and his officials think it was a good plan or a bad idea?
Great.
Good.
They all agreed that it was a good plan. So what position of authority was Joseph given by Pharaoh?
Second in command.
Second in command is one of them. There's a couple others.
In charge of the whole land.
In charge of collection of the grain.
And distribution.
And then put in charge of distribution.
Why do you think Pharaoh believed?
The answer to, I don't know.
God.
I don't know.
He was second in command, right? So Pharaoh already.
Well, this was before he was put in those positions, though. This is just when Joseph was called in and say, hey, I've heard you've been able to interpret dreams. I've had these dreams. Tell me about it. And Joseph told him, and Pharaoh said, okay, sounds good to me.
He'd already had one witness testify that, I screwed up. I should have told you about this. This is what happened, and all of this actually came true. He interpreted both of our dreams, and both of our dreams came true.
Yeah, the baker and the wine.
So he already had one witness that said, it's my fault, I should have told you about this already.
Wait, didn't one of them get put to death?
Yeah,
Yes.
the baker did.
So he didn't witness to it.
No, but the wine guy confirmed that the baker's dream and all that.
Yeah.
But more importantly, Joseph didn't take credit.
No, he always gave credit to God. Yeah, we see that throughout. So how many years was it between the time when Joseph was sold off as a slave to him being reunited with his brothers? This was on the video. This is what you missed by the video. So let me just kind of jump in.
17 years?
In Genesis 37:2, he says he was 17 years old when he was sold. Todd actually talked about that. Genesis 41:46 said he was 30 years old when he was placed in charge of the land of Egypt.
13.
And he did see him for the 35, and then it was 2 years into the family, so he was 37.
20 years.
About 22.
20,
what I
yeah.
came up with.
It said 2 years into the family.
Yeah, there's 2 years in the famine. We get that from Genesis 45:11. And it's on page 39 in the book. It doesn't say 2 years, but it says 5 remaining years. So we do a little quick math and come up with 2.
So they had 13 years in prison, 7 good years, then 2 years.
2 of famine.
That's how you get 22.
Yeah.
Oh,
I got 22.
39, okay. Minus 17, that's 22, yeah.
Yeah.
So what number do you?
22.
32 years?
22.
22.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 22 years from the
It's
time
no
he was-
wonder that they didn't recognize him.
Yeah. really. I mean, he was 17. You change a lot in 22 years from a teenager.
He also wasn't wearing the same colored full
That's true.
coat either. No telling what he was wearing.
Probably purple. I mean, we don't know.
Something very regal and royal and
Yeah.
headgear and everything else.
Yeah.
Speaking Egyptian, they wouldn't have even thought twice about it.
So during the famine, Joseph's older brothers came to Egypt to buy food, but they did not recognize Joseph. That's page 34. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph recognized his brothers and accused them of what?
Spying.
Being spies. He knew they really weren't spies, right? He was just pulling their leg, as we would say.
But you accuse somebody even now, you've got the Patriot Act, or whatever it is, you put them in prison.
Well, yeah,
So,
yeah. So Joseph, we just passed that, I'm sorry. So after a series of twists that included his brothers bowing before him in fulfillment of his dreams, Joseph revealed himself to the brothers, page 39. They were shocked, yet soon glad to be reunited with him. Joseph sent word for the entire family that joined them in Egypt until after the famine, that's page 40, Genesis 45, 16, and beyond. So question number 11, Jacob was hesitant about going, so what was God's promise to him? Page 40.
he spoke to Israel in a vision.
Yeah,
Don't be afraid.
Yeah, don't be afraid. I'll make your family a great nation. And he made another promise to Jacob.
Joseph will close your eyes.
Yeah, Jacob would die in Egypt with Joseph by his side.
Did you think it was interesting that his name was Israel at that point, but God called him Jacob? I said Jacob, and
Yeah, no, I really hadn't thought about it, to be honest with you. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers in Egypt, gave them property in the best part of the land. How about that? Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. He died at the age of 147. That's page 41, Genesis 47:28. When their father Jacob died, Joseph's brothers, how did they act?
Whoops.
Yeah, they were kind of scared. They feared that Joseph would take revenge against them for their prior treatment. Page 41, Genesis 50, verse 15. They came to Joseph and begged for his forgiveness, appealing to a request their father had made before he died. Page 41. What was that request?
Don't bury me here.
Yeah, he didn't want to be buried there. So Joseph wept when he heard their appeal because revenge was the last thing on his mind. Page 41. His brothers then came and drew themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. And this is Genesis 50:18. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves, they said. That's New Living Translation. But Joseph told them not to be afraid. He told them that what they intended as harm, God intended as good. This is what Todd was talking about earlier, Genesis 50:19 and 20. So when Joseph told his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it to be good, what does that statement tell you about God? When Joseph made the statement that God basically had all this, using this for good, even though you may think it was bad or was going to be bad, what does that tell you about God?
God has a plan, and He is in control, despite what you might think.
Exactly.
He could make lemonade out of lemons.
Absolutely.
I'm just thrilled that Joseph recognized it.
I bet he could make apple juice out of lemons.
You think you're talking about Joseph recognizing it was God all
Joseph even
along?
recognized it, yeah.
Yeah, that tells you about his faith, about Joseph's faith. Yes, sir, Jack.
I find it interesting that at this time they're rejoicing, they're in this great position and saved and in the best part of the land. But God's plan from the beginning, and you can see it as you look at how God's plan was to put them there and then make them a great nation as slaves.
Yeah,
So he's not done with them.
yeah. Yep. Anything else? Anybody else have a thought or a comment?
And back to lesson 1, when God promised the coming of Jesus to Adam and Eve before casting them out of the garden, God has a plan.
Yeah.
He is in control.
Yeah.
And it's long term, very long term.
And we don't know what that time is, do we?
Yeah.
Where are we? 13. What strikes you about Joseph's attitude toward his brothers and the way he treats them? In reality, could Joseph have gotten back to them? I mean, did Joseph have the right to mistreat them if he wanted to?
Easily.
He's in charge.
Easily.
He's the whole country.
Yeah, I mean, this is still under the old law, the eye for an eye, and all that sort of stuff going on
He
here.
was still in charge in Egypt.
He was in charge. He was number 2 man in that area. So, what does that tell you about Joseph's attitude toward his brothers?
He forgave them.
Okay,
Loved him anyway.
he loved them no matter what, didn't he?
He showed them mercy that God had shown Joseph.
Yeah,
Amen.
yeah. So, what is the similarity in how Joseph treated his brothers and how Esau treated Jacob in Genesis 33? Y'all remember that
Yeah.
last week?
Esau had a very large army. He could have annihilated Jacob.
Yeah.
Yet he didn't.
It's sort of like a forgive and forget type of situation. John?
I just think it proves twice that we can not necessarily forget, but we can forgive
Yeah.
after injustices are done. to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. I'm sure Joseph didn't forget what the brothers had done to him.
Well, it
we don't
says here
forget.
that he didn't, that what you intended for harm,
Yeah.
God intended for good. So he didn't forget.
He remembered it, yeah. We saw the real, is that the reason for it. Bernard?
Look at what the brothers didn't believe that they were forgiven.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't accept it, they had to go back begging him, okay, basically, did you mean what you said?
Yeah. yeah.
Yeah,
They were, I think again, they were expecting some harm done.
Yes, a lot of times we don't do that, when somebody forgives you, don't keep harping on it or doing whatever
Yeah.
we need to do.
Yeah,
If they forgive you, you move on.
Move on.
To the next step.
yeah. Jared?
There, I just want to say, there again, one of God's lessons, the errors in your way you hate your brother, for this and that, and it comes fast.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Aren't we glad that God forgives us?
Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely. So Joseph tells his brothers that he would continue to take care of them and their children. Todd again alluded to that, page 42. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. Page 42, that's Genesis 50:22. Joseph died at the age of 110. That's Genesis 50:22, and also repeats it in verse 26. So from a human standpoint, the lower story, Joseph was in the worst place, abandoned by family, sold into slavery, cast into prison. From a divine perspective, the upper story, he was in the best place. So how did Joseph's understanding of what God was doing to save Israel in the upper story help him deal with what his brothers did in the lower story? Then it's going to work out. One way or the other, it's going to work out. Anybody else have a thought?
How much of his grandfather's story had been told to his great-grandfather's story had been told to Joseph about the sacrificing of Isaac?
Isaac, I'm sure, quite a bit.
Let's hope.
Yeah, I mean that's how the history got handed down back then was family from generation to generation. So I'm sure.
Evidently was talked about because Moses is one that wrote about it.
Yeah.
How many hundreds of years was that? So
Yeah.
it was a big deal that Abraham believed he could raise him back from the dead.
Yeah.
So Joseph must have recognized, and they hadn't seen that before. They hadn't seen anybody raised from the dead before.
No.
So that must have made an impact on all of these
I'm sure, yeah. Anybody else?
So after the famine, why did the Israelites not go back to the promised land?
Got comfortable.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought.
That's next week.
Next week.
Okay. I mean, they've
You're
been there
pre- you're
17 years.
You're preaching next week again, right?
That's why you just hold that thought.
Okay.
Very short sermon.
Any other thoughts that we could talk about today? We don't need to hold it up to it. So what do we learn about God from the years of trials Joseph faced? I didn't give you any of the answers. I want to hear what you think.
All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord.
Okay? Romans, where have we heard that before?
Yeah. Reuben read it to us this morning.
Yeah, God's providence is always active.
Be patient.
Sorry?
Be patient.
Be patient?
Persevere.
Yeah.
And don't think when something bad's happening to you about the fact that something bad's happening to you.
Trying to find the good in it, is that what you're saying?
Just know that God's in the background working.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes it was not for your good at the time. And that's
Yeah.
what Joseph recognized. Sometimes we go through stuff that's not for necessarily for our good, but it's for somebody else's good later on who is watching us.
You might also say that don't be jealous of someone because God's going to bless them if you are.
Right.
Especially if you treat them unfairly.
Yeah, and we see that, don't we? I mean, we see someone being blessed, God blessing them in a certain way. We have jealous tendencies sometimes, don't we?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of times.
Bob, you don't, I'm sure.
People are treated unfairly because of jealousy, and
Yeah.
perhaps God will bless them in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's what I came up with, you can agree or disagree. God never leaves us or forsakes us. God's providence is always active. Obedience does not mean an easy life. Run from temptation. That's easier said than done sometimes. Give God all the glory. And finally, honor the authorities God places over you. That's hard sometimes, isn't it? But that's what he says. Genesis 41:33, 50:20, and Titus 3:1. Titus 3:1's not blah. Titus 3:1, right with that one down. Anybody else think of any other? Jack?
I can say this one, what Scott said too, but what strikes me is God uses unlikely people to be the heroes.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've already seen that in the story. We're just on lesson 3. Just wait till we get to the end of the story. Oh, by the way, that time chart, a church in Tennessee, that we went through the stories a couple of years ago, they sent us that, no charge, for us to use. So they sent us some other stuff too. So that was nice. So in the story of Joseph and his brothers, we see the themes of forgiveness, the father-son bond, sibling rivalry, brotherly love, God's sovereignty, and God's greater good in times of suffering. Just like Joseph, we are called to forgive those who have offended us and see life's experiences as part of God's plan to help us serve others. All of us naturally avoid times of struggle, pain, and hardship, but these moments in life might just be the tool God uses to accomplish His will in and through us. We must allow the story of Joseph to help us understand how God can work through difficult circumstances to bring about good. Any comments, questions? Next week we'll look at the miraculous way the Lord delivered the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt. From a story we're all familiar with, but we'll break it apart and look at some of the details on that. Your homework for next week, read lesson 4.
Hey, Lynn,
Yes, sir.
I think the reason that the brothers didn't recognize Joseph is because he walked like an Egyptian.
You're probably right, but yeah. Next week, let me throw this out. Let me throw this out about next week real quick. Next week is the Mexico mission trip cookout, right? Yes. Luncheon, which will be in here. More than likely will be in the auditorium, but we'll let you know. But more than likely, we'll take the class in the auditorium next week. Just letting you know about that. Anything else anybody wants to say? Look at your last page. It's a little bonus. You didn't pay for this one. This is something I found several years ago. Actually, I used it in one of the home group meetings.
Yeah.
Parallels, you remember it?
Yeah, I did.
Parallels between Joseph and Jesus. Joseph is one of the people the Old Testament points to Jesus through foreshadows of situations and actions. And this is a list with scripture reference of how Joseph and Jesus, their lives are parallel with each other. So that's a little bonus for you. Like I always try to tell you, you get more in my class than you pay for. So.
You're giving away preacher secrets there.
Yeah.